In snow and ice blanketed the tiny landlocked country as the event the locals call the Bringer of Rain drew near. The leading lights from last year's rally have their say.
Ons kanse vir jaar dink ek baie goed met hierdie voertuig. Hulle het baie werk. Die fabriek het baie werk daaraan gedoen. En hy het nog nooit gevoel soos hy nou voel nie. Maar so sê ons elke keer, né, dan voel die kar of hy nog beter is as wat hy nog ooit is, maar hierdie keer glo ons by hulle hy is nog nooit so goed.
Maar ek dink hierdie jaar is ons weer hier so om te wen en ons gaan definitief ons best probeer en ek sien dit reën alweer. So ek kry die manne in die ander handgoggas maar net jammer. Vir ons behoort dit alright te gaan nou weer.
Hastily fitted windscreens to open cars were the order of the day as racers learned of the bad weather.
Well, it's a bit of an experiment. We had a tremendous problem with mud last year, and as you can see, it is wet again this year. So we'll see how it goes. My main worry is water. We haven't got a very good water supply, and hopefully we don't have to use too much water to keep the mud off the screen.
We'll be riding our faithful Safari. 601 is our number. It stood us in good stead so far, but I would much have preferred to have ridden our new little monster, which is still floating on the bay somewhere down in Durban.
We've got all the overseas riders. We've got Alfie, we've got Willie, Port. There's going to be really a big fight this year, I think. And depending on the weather, will probably favour us if it gets drier, I think. But the overseas guys, if it's really wet.
Tough guy Willie Island sets off.
Heeltemal tot die einde, definitief. Ek wil hom nie eens sien nie.
No, I don't believe that I'm able to win the roof this year because there are strong guys like Francisowicz, a friend of mine, and also Kevin Hines from USA, and also the South Africa. I think they improved a lot, so that it will be hard for me to win this year. But I will do my best, I think.
The traditional Round the Houses event was started by the Minister of Transport, Colonel Mukhanso. Each class raced for 12 kilometers through the streets of Maseru and through a polo field, which soon became a mud bath and a foretaste of what was to come. Derek Pinoy and Roland Geiger set the pace in the competitive twin-seater specials class. Top driver Klaus Degener built a two-seater because he was tired of getting lost on other off-road events. For the earlier car races, the ground was dry, but things can and would change. Class 7 for single-seaters gets flagged off. The race is important because it sets the starting order for the first racing section, a time trial. Some seem reluctant to take the very first bend as spectators scatter. He got going again, taking a hay bale with him. The big boys, the truck class where most of the action could be expected. A team from the Royal Lesotho Defence Force enter a bright blue truck called the Rock Spider every year. The polo field, water polo perhaps. Some were to strike trouble sooner than others, and many started to have second thoughts about the 1988 Roof of Africa rally. The first of the bikes, the over 250cc machines, the rain came down. Chunky off-road tyres don't work too well on wet tarmac, as this bunch found out. Some riders in the 200 class didn't even make the first turn, and the race was restarted. Although these were the smallest bikes, it was the biggest field. Hilary Lewis, riding a 200 Kawasaki, was the only solo woman entrant this year. By now, the mud in the field was really tricky, but that didn't seem to worry Alfie Cox on his 250 Kawasaki. Clive Strugnell on a Suzuki led for much of this race, but fell down with the Hilton Beatty. After the Round the Houses, a 60-kilometer time trial and the start to the real racing. A choir turned out, and everywhere the local motorsport fans gave the roofers lots of encouragement. If the route was unclear, there was always someone on hand to point out the way. Although in the mountains, some direction givers were more enthusiastic than accurate. Some cars sported hastily rigged mudguards in a vain bid to keep the mud off the crew. Fording rivers meant a brief car wash until the other side. Rivers were swollen from melting snow and heavy rain. But over the next 2 days, worse was still to come. Looking like huge beetles and breathing clouds of steam like prehistoric monsters, the cars lunged at the far bank, which was becoming a rutted, slippery nightmare. Crews of cars with windscreens would battle to see through them, but the open cars would soon be awash with Lesotho's topsoil. Richard Carolyn scarcely seems to need all his wheels in the rough terrain. All the cars had tow ropes already fitted to the front bumpers, and many would need them. Some teams did some careful thinking about tyres. Veteran roofer John Smith's buggy sports tractor tyres at the back wheels. He was one of the few who got a good grip on Africa, even if not everything was firmly attached. Getting right across the river needed a clear run, and when the man in front's unsure of the safest route, the wise just wait a while. Some tried a form of mechanical hyperventilating. Is that a human being? Across the river, one man is still stuck at the bottom of that slippery bank, and he enlists the aid of some enthusiastic locals. Last year's winner, Philip Malone, grabbed an early lead, letting everyone know he was coming through and making the whole thing look so simple. Special thin mud tyres cut through the surface and grip the solid ground underneath. Even with lessons from Milan and Hannes Grobler, it looks as if he's going to be at the bottom of that bank for quite a while. The truck's full bodywork keeps the muddy water under control, and the crews don't even get their feet wet. Although later on, navigators would be forced to wade chest deep through the icy rivers to find safe footing for the cars. Young porters were always available for a fee, payable on the other side, of course. The multiple German champion Bert von Zitzewitz was in his element in the typically European muddy conditions, and after quickly working out a route across the river, the traffic jam on the far side didn't worry him at all. American gold medalist Kevin Hines was later to admit that the roof was the toughest race of his entire life. But he's coming back next year, and he'll be bringing some friends too. But local star Jeremy Davies seems hard-pressed to match the foreigner's pace in the cold and wet conditions. His Kawasaki's engine flooded with water. With just 80 kilometers of the 800-kilometer route completed, the roof was taking its toll as competitors were sidelined by mechanical failure or were time-barred. A dawn start to day two saw a thinning entry of teams facing a shortened 320-kilometer car course into Lesotho's southern wastes. About 20 vehicles didn't make it back before nightfall, and their drivers spent a chilly night in a rural school with just the legendary Basotho hospitality to keep them warm and fed. Rivalry between the two local teams went right to the end. Ashley Thorne and Jan Kors in the Fiery Dragon dueling with Wilfred Westerlau and Dagmar Blankner in the Bread Van. For the bikers came the news that the legendary Baboons Pass was under a meter of snow, and their route wasn't going to be trimmed. With some top-flight rivals ahead of him, Cox knew he had to race every inch of the way. Along the route, service and refuel points allow teams to wipe mud from visors, top up tanks, and fix anything which is broken. Already, the cars are strung out, and competitors more than 4 hours behind the leaders will be time-barred and disqualified. Bike race leader von Zitzewitz has had to stop and fix a puncture, and Cox blasts past to take the lead. The German was to repeatedly fight back up to the front, only to suffer even more setbacks. For some of the route, cars and bikes raced on the same roads, and the course was well defined. When they separated, the snow covered the route markers. Pathfinding for the front man could be agonizingly difficult. Last year's second-place man, Joachim Sauer, holds a narrow lead over South African rider Willie Ireland, and the faster bikes were soon passing the cars. Klaus Degener and Wiley Harrington, having got stuck in a river on day one, gamely fought on, but more problems were to come their way. By now, rivers were becoming major obstacles. Unexpected holes and fast-flowing torrents unseated many riders. Some scouted around for other places to cross, and here the South African riders had a small advantage, thinking to ask locals where the best crossings were. Even Cox has to manhandle his machine across. Hines and Ireland stop on the far bank to investigate. Sauer starts the long job of draining his drowned engine and carburetor of water, turning the bike upside down and turning the back wheel to pump it out. Cox gets his bike going first, but Hilton Beattie seems to have other ideas and seeks an alternative route, crossing the river only once, while everyone else went through it 3 times. Ireland keeps his motor running and walks the bike across successfully. The main rivals set off in a bunch, advantages gone. Von Zitzewitz, having repaired his puncture and fought back up the field, clears the river just minutes behind the leaders. Soon they're actually helping one another across the rivers, each one needing the others simply to survive and keep going. Meanwhile, Grobler and Swanepoel in the Nissan have taken the lead from Milan and Leek as the Toyota's turbocharger gave trouble. The 2 leaders are steadily stretching their lead, but as the day wears on, Grobler noses further and further ahead. The tiny Russian-made Lada Niva is still running and looking very steady and sure as many others gradually drop out in the worsening conditions. Beattie, still leading after skirting the rivers, tackles the start of the notorious 8-kilometer-long Baboons Pass, with Cox scant minutes behind him. Kevin Hines is riding hard, keen to keep up with the South Africans, but they've ridden this pass before and know that the summit is blanketed in snow. Ireland has von Zitzewitz right behind him as they tackle the boulder-strewn path that was once the only route into Lesotho's heart. From a helicopter, a single thin line through the snow marks the route, and clouds often drop down to the mountains, cutting visibility to a few meters. Riders unable to see the ground under the snow tumble from their bikes, and many start to run out of petrol. It is von Zitzewitz who carves the first line of tracks to the peak. The helicopter fetches fuel for the stranded riders, some wearing space blankets against the bitter cold. Others, at the end of their endurance, request a helicopter flight out of the snow, convinced they won't make it any other way. Once again, von Zitzewitz is well down on the leaders. Once out of the pass, Cox retakes the lead from Beattie, who also ran out of fuel. Reaching an intersection with no one else's tracks to guide him, he's unsure of the route, but is given the right direction. Behind him, Hines is riding harder than ever in his attempt to pass Cox, while Sauer is letting neither of them get away. Davies has fought his way through the field after several setbacks by the end of day 2. But he knows the race is far from over. Already some classes of cars have been completely wiped out as the Marshal's list of survivors gets shorter. Several bikers had to be airlifted from Baboons Pass as darkness closed in, and organisers shortened the car route for day 3.
Die baie was natuurlijk verschrikkelijk nat geweest en ek moet jou sê, ons 'n paar plekke daar met die berge af wat ek nie kan glo eintlik dat ons kon afgekom het daar in die bakke heeltyd so na die afgronde toe gegly. En ek moet jou sê, ek het so iets in my lewe nog nie beleef nie.
Well, today, I'll tell you what, it was the hardest roof I've ever done, you know, on the second day. It was incredible. I cannot believe what we have done today. 2-3 foot deep of snow for the last 3 kilometers at the top of Baboons Pass, and just push and carry, and it was hard. Before we got to the pass, we had to cross a river crossing 3 times, and there's just no ways you could ride across it. It was up to your shoulders deep. So basically what we did was just dived into the river with the bikes, held on the handlebars and swam them across. Turned them upside down, took all the water out, got them going. It was tough. I mean, I've just never ridden in conditions like it in my life before.
And preparations for the final day carried on late into the night. A much smaller band started off from Lance's Gap at dawn the next morning. Almost unbelievably, Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase were half an hour behind Grobler and Swanepoel in second place. Pinoy driving brilliantly in his open car in the terrible conditions. Malone and Leek battled on, but the loss of their turbocharger robbed the Toyota of much of its power. The bikers set off later, with 2 more tough passes ahead of them, Vitelli and Rampai, both of them under snow. Within 30 kilometers of the start, Grobler struck a problem. At the first river crossing, a Marshal's car had drowned. A tractor, hired to pull it out, had also slipped into the water, completely blocking the only visible path. As the Nissan crew scouted for another way across, Pinoy arrived and simply followed them over when they found a safe passage through the water, wiping out their hard-earned half-hour advantage. Degener and Harrington had gone up to third, while Lesotho aces Thorne and Cross reached the first service point in 4th spot. Malone and Leek soldiered on in their Toyota, well aware of Grobler's lost time and knowing the leaders can easily become non-finishers. Crews coming through this valley had to contend with local Saturday morning traffic, mostly in ox-drawn wagons or very old cars, which seemed to get through the mud quite easily. The falling rain made the mud worse, but that didn't seem to deter the little larder. For the bikers, conditions were worse than ever, as visibility again dropped to almost zero in the snow-covered mountains, and pathfinding over the Latelli Pass became a mixture of intuition and guesswork. Cox stayed in front, but Sauer passed Hines for second, although he made heavy weather of some of the wet and slippery boulders in the mist. Once again, von Zitzewitz fought back up the field, the big German rider seemingly never without a wide grin. Conditions changed rapidly and some riders had perfect visibility and a clearly marked path to follow. Jeremy Davies battled on, only worried if the German Sauer was ahead of him, shaking his head when he learned that he was. Hines, the weather closed in again. Mike Kant, riding his first ever Roof of Africa, was comfortably ahead in the 200 class. Once out of the mountains, Cox again set a cracking pace, determined to keep his lead. His smooth riding makes it look so easy, yet on sections like this, he would touch 150 kilometers an hour. Sour, following just one set of tracks, knows that only Cox heads him, and he urges every gram of speed out of the big 350 KTM. But it's not enough. Cox streaks ahead to cross the line half an hour ahead of the German rider. At the finish, the large welcoming crowd is gathered in spite of the rain, and Alfie, looking remarkably fresh and pretty clean, wins his first roof at the third attempt.
It was just murderous, man. I just had to keep going, and in the end now I'm happy, man. I wasn't happy out there, definitely. Hardest roof I think ever we've had. You know, they've had snow before, but the rain and the cold is just unreal.
Some doubt existed as to whether the cars would be able to cross the final river, but Hannes and Piet were able to get the Nissan through.
Ek sê ek het in my lewe nog nie so iets beleef nie. Miskien na vandag gaan ek besluit om definitief nooit weer die roef te ry nie. Uiteindelik baie goed in ons gegaan. Ons het geen probleme met die voertuig gehad nie. Na ons oggend die weg gaan, maar ons het op tydplekke gery. Ek kon nie glo waar ons heen vat nie. Ons het op kante van die berge langs gery, waar die paadjies so smal soos die voertuig is, en dan is dit nog glad en nat ook. Ek sê vir die eerste maal op die veldrein het ek bang geword eintlik. Maar Piet het my ook so bang gepraat langs aan, jy weet, ek moes bang word. Maar ons bly om hier te wees. Baie lekker geweest.
Mike Kant had slammed into the back of Grobler's truck 30 kilometers from the end, and Grobler unwittingly reversed over the bike. Kant rode on with a bent front wheel to win his class. The Lada finally crossed the line just 63 seconds before the 4-hour time bar. Many others were not so lucky. Of over 200 entries, less than 30 made it to the end of what's been called the toughest roof in years.
Well, we may have missed out on Shanghai, but landed at PR Maphepu Airport at Thohoyandou in Venda. Venda, the land of legends, where the cream of the off-road racing fraternity have gathered to compete in the final event for the South African Championships. Silverline Venda Sun 500. Competitors from all over the country in rigs of all shapes and sizes, from Beetles to state-of-the-art space frames, lined up for scrutineering at the Independence Stadium. Racing on the first day promised all action, as only a few points separated the log leaders. We spoke to Wilfred Westlow and Derek Pinoy.
Not afraid at all. We only need 13 points to clinch the title.
Well, I'm going to just go out there and go as quick as I can, because in off-road racing, there's nothing happens till you have to finish and the flags drop.
On Friday the 18th, the casino racing section will determine actual starting positions for the next day. For some, the Silverline Venda Sun would always be remembered as the one we ended up in a hole. And for others, negotiating not only a tough course, but also playing dodgems with the local four-legged species and enthusiastic supporters. Ian Gregg, who later received the Spirit of Vendor Award for assisting a biker in distress, decided to hitch a lift from a friendly grader operator. And the results of the racing section: cars Kasi Kutsia and Swanepoel, as you can see, in the Nissan Safari, 48 minutes and 38 seconds, followed by Draper and Smith and Pinoy and Purchase. In the bike section, it was Jeremy Davies who had the fastest time on the Driveline's Kawasaki, 41 minutes and 54 seconds, followed by Willie Island, Alfie Cox and Mike Kent. Competitors awoke to a beautiful, clear day, and at 7 a.m. they were ready to go. Kasi Kutsia, fastest on the casino racing section. Linton Draper lined up for the grueling 500 kilometers, and he had plenty to ponder about. Right on his tail was Derek Pinoy and Books Carolyn. Closely followed by drivers who could upset the day: Kenny Scholthammer, Gavin O'Bell and Robin Yates. Their times were so close, and real needle racing awaits us for almost 8 hours. Kasi Kutsia in his Nissan Safari soon settled into his driving style. Whilst further back, Robin Yates was pressing Kenny Scholthammer to the limit. Hard at work and with the adrenaline pumping was Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase. They have to put as much time between them and the team of Wilfred Westlau and Dagmar Blankner if there is to be the slightest chance of the South African title. Through the first river crossing, the Lavuvu River was giving Pinoy the chance of overtaking Yates. This is Gavin O'Bell, who was going well but was soon to retire with steering difficulties. Jack Spencer was using all the horses of his Rover V8 to negotiate this crossing. After 1 hour and 30 minutes, it was Willie Island leading the bikers. He had overtaken Jeremy Davies, who had an unfortunate tumble. Not wanting to be outdone, the locals staged their own race. Maybe this young fellow will be severely penalized for not wearing a helmet. "90 kilometers into the race, Kasi Kutsia and Pete Swanepoel start the first of the mountain passes and the start of the real back-breaking section. Closely followed by Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase. By now the front-runners have churned up the track, and the rest of the field have to contend with loose sand and rocks on an incline, which left casualties with broken engine mountings and flat tires. Some competitors even had their navigators, irrespective of sex, literally and figuratively groveling in the vendor dirt. A flying Willie Island tackles another river crossing, possibly unaware that a very determined Alfie Cox, recent Roof of Africa winner, was desperately trying to catch him. The unfortunate Cox was forced to retire 20 minutes later with electrical problems. Breathing down Alfie's neck was Jeremy Davies, winner of the Toyota Desert Race held earlier this year. Some conditions of the Silverline Venda Sun 500 were likened to the infamous Baboon's Pass of the Roof of Africa. And even more treacherous, as Willie and Jeremy soon experienced on this stretch of tractionless rock and sand. After this checkpoint, Cassie Coetzee was forced to retire with transfer box problems, allowing Jack Spencer in his Sandmaster to take the overall lead. He was first through the refuel point, giving him a considerable lead of 12 minutes over second-placed Books Carolyn in the Lubriquip Raceco.
That's very fun, man. We've had a few problems. We had a puncture, and then we got stuck. We've lost the reverse gear, so we've had a bit of drama, but the car's going fine. We don't know what happened to Dennis. We thought there were still about 4 guys in front of us, so to find out we're lying second now. Alles weg.
Eight minutes later, it was Derek Pinoy's turn to refuel his Chenoweth after he lost his second overall position to Carolyn because of drive shaft gremlins.
Jack was about 15 minutes ahead of you. 15. That's Jack. Jack is now 17. 17. And Buck? Okay. Go for it. Buck's about 5 minutes. The thing is, I've got nothing to lose, so I know 6 or next. Go for it. The second over the airplane.
Here, Willie Island demonstrates his aggressive driving skills to make up for his recent unsuccessful attempt in the Baja 1000, where his co-rider, Hilton Beattie, crashed their bike out of contention on the first day of the event. Here's Jeremy Davies negotiating one of the many river crossings. Not finding the water crossing all that easy were Kunneke and Kronk, no doubt wondering whether an amphibious vehicle would have been better suited to this stage. Mike Kent, showing incredible determination on his 200cc KDX as he is hauling in the rest of the field in this, his first ever season of off-road racing. .70 kilometers into this grueling event, Derek Pinoy has taken second place over from the luckless Books Carolyn, who had wrong slotted into a tea plantation. And now the race is on, as only a slender 47 seconds separate them. But Pinoy's second place is in jeopardy as he has a puncture in the left rear tyre. Now it's decision time. Pinoy has Brooks Carolyn in his rear view mirror and a rocky terrain ahead. What is his decision going to be? He stops. And Carolyn's racecoat thunders past him and back into second place, a position he held to the finish. As the finish line became a reality, competitors were hoping for an easier terrain, but it was not to be, as they were soon confronted with virtually impossible riding conditions which taxed man and machine to the limit. Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak could already taste the winner's champagne as they crossed the last obstacle before the finishing post. Willie Island comes screaming through the dust to catch up with the leading cars and make up almost 2 hours on both Spencer and Carolyn, an incredible performance. Pinoy's bad luck continues. He has to be winched out of the mud, and later he was penalised for a malfunctioning yellow light. However, this did not deter him from finishing a worthy third overall. And there's a victory salute from Steve as Jack crosses the line for their first victory in a national event in 2 years. A jubilant Willie Island still finds the energy to wheelie first past the checkered flag.
Well, thank you. Very nice. This race was tough, butchy.
Thanks for that.
And there are the overall results. Willie Island took the honours on the Butch Hirsch KTM, time of 7 hours, 2 minutes and 8 seconds, followed by Jeremy Davis, Kevin Tebbett, Mike Kent and Kevin Dupont. For the cars, it was Spencer and Vermaak who came in first, Carolyn and Geiger second, Pinoy and Purchase were third. Tough though it was, the event ended on a happy note.
Since its inception in 1986, the Camel Sun City 400 race has become a popular event with South African off-road competitors. This year was no exception, with 72 cars and 128 motorcycle competitors coming under starters orders. 3 of them, Robbie Gordon, John Kaiser and Roger Mears Jr., came from America. But unfortunately, both Kaiser and Mears had problems even before the start of the event.
Yeah, well, okay, race day has arrived. Of course, it's overcast, as you can probably see. But our testing, Roger took the 4x4 yesterday, and our testing, we blew the clutch and the gearbox. We worked right through the night until 6 o'clock this morning. And we found that it's just impossible. We won't have it ready, competitively ready, that is. And we've decided now that Roger will now drive the Bud.
Yeah, I was going to drive the Safari vehicle. We have a little problem with the Safari, and we can't find it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and drive the Bud, and hopefully we can give everybody a good challenge out there.
The courses are real fast compared to America. America, we race over bumps the whole time. Here we race kind of on roads. It's more like rally racing.
reigning Sun City 400 champions Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase led away the field in their new locally designed twin-seater. Meanwhile, American John Kaiser was still working frantically in the pit to prepare his Camel GRE single-seater. The 19-year-old US Stadium off-road champion Robbie Gordon and co-driver Hendrik Vervoort set about the wet and muddy course with a vengeance and immediately challenged for the lead. The ever-consistent Niels Eriksen and Flip Coetzee in their immaculately prepared Super Beetle were to play an important part in the race. The 1986 Sun City 400 winners, Bodo Berthold and Paul Coetzee, were confident of a repeat victory in their locally built Orco twin-seater. With his Camel GRE on loan from local driver Brian Atkins, now in working order, American John Kaiser jumped the waiting line of cars for a belated start to his race.
Johnny Kaiser from the USA in the Camel car. They've done a lot of work in getting that prepared. It's literally hot off the bed and is now on his way. Got a way to go.
Sun City Promotions manager Russell McMillan next flagged off Roger Mears in the Draper Nissan hardbody. His race, however, proved to be short and disappointing when an electrical fault forced him to retire within the first 5 minutes of the race.
I'm just watching. You screw it up, you're going to sign a Barclay card straight away. So there they go.
Early race leaders Pinoy and Purchase were hotly pursued by a hard-charging Gordon. With Eriksen and Coetzee in the VW and Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak in their Rover V8 engine truck-craft Standmaster close behind. Berthold and Coetzee set a rather conservative pace in their Orco, and Peter Luck and Russell Clark, also in an Orco, demonstrated how it shouldn't be done. Former Roof of Africa winner John Smith was making rapid progress in the X-Class Jaguar King Scorpion, but would eventually retire with mechanical problems. John Kaiser also set a blistering pace, but with the right rear wheel of his Camel GRE already showing signs of damage, he would only complete about 10 kilometers before retiring.
I started late and passed probably 3 cars before I broke and was running real well. But we just had car problems, and I'm sorry to see that coming all this way.
It was a frustrating day for the Draper team, with Linton Draper not starting, Mears retiring, and Craig Draper shown here soon to roll. Robbie Gordon's rapid pace soon saw him in the overall lead as the cars headed back to the stadium for the first time. Five minutes behind Gordon came the consistent Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak in their V8 engine Sandmaster. Philip Malone and Gilo de Greef used the event to shake down their new turbocharged Toyota Hilux. They were locked in battle with the Orco of Berthold and Coetzee on the wet and muddy route, which tended to suit the space frame cars better. Competitors had to finish each of the 4 76-kilometer laps in the Sun City Supercross Stadium, and Gordon treated the spectators to some spectacular driving. He was soon to lose the lead when the car developed brake problems, leaving Berthold and Coetzee and Spencer and Vermaak to fight for the #1 spot. Philip Malone showed that a Bucky could be every bit as spectacular as a space frame car. The tough conditions took their toll, but Trevor Else and Div de Villiers in the Toyota Land Cruiser soldiered on to win the 6 to 8-cylinder 4x4 class. Despite getting stuck in a river, 4-4 Skippers in the Ford took the honours in the 6 to 8-cylinder 2-wheel drive commercial class. Rob Gibson drove his Ventura Bandit to a well-earned win in the single-seater special class. Larder importer Adolf Weidelit and Tony Salvage got the better of teammates Gavin Orbell and Peter Lee to win the 4-cylinder 4x4 class in their Larder Neva. Class 7 for hybrid vehicles was won by Saki Kukumur and Prithpuri in their VW. Robert Walk in the Hazer Razor drove consistently to pick up the honours in the budget single and two-seater class. The modified saloon class was won by Craig Hopkinson and Martin Spencer in their VW Baja. Stratford Fook swapped his Toyota for a Suzuki Quad Racer and romped to the ATV class win. Meanwhile, the fight for overall victory continued. Having solved their brake problems, the hard-charging Gordon and Verwoerd rejoined the race in 7th place. Gordon takes up the story.
Well, we had brake caliper problem 2 times. The first time it took us almost an hour to fix it. It took us 45 minutes to be exact. We ended up getting beat, I think, 10 minutes in the race. So we made up a whole bunch of time on the last 2 laps.
Gordon was unable to catch winners Bodo Bertelt and Paul Kutzer, who drove an intelligent race to win this event for the 2nd time in 4 years. The second place crew were Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak, and Gordon had to be content with 3rd position. The motorcycle category attracted a large entry, which included the usual off-road stars and some motocross springboks, with both groups laying claim to victory.
We are able to go the same pace for the whole race. They race and then they slow down, they race, they slow down. So, but it's good to have them coming out and just make us go faster.
Because I'm not used to the enduros, you do tend to fall it up because I seem to try so much harder than, but because of the motocross technique, you're always on the cable and you're always trying very hard. And also the terrain varies so much on the enduros.
Well, there's a lot of competition today. BT's on the 500, it's Willie on the 250, Peterson's out here to take us on. We've got Presford who's on a 125, but I'm going to give it a good bash today. It's going to be very wet and it's my type of terrain, so I hope to pull it off again today.
The race had to be started twice as a result of the leading riders taking the wrong route on the first lap, which resulted in them being confronted by riders who were on the correct route. Hilton Beattie in particular welcomed the decision as he had crashed and dislocated his finger on the first lap and was forced to retire. The restart saw him back in the race with his dislocated finger wrapped up. Willie Ireland, who later retired with mechanical problems, Saki Niemont, Carl Presswood and Jeremy Davies made no bones about their intentions at the start. Davies loved the conditions and soon led from motocross star Gary Peterson. Not everybody enjoyed the wet roads and rough terrain, however, and for very good reasons. Carl Presswood on the Ultimoil Kawasaki set a fast pace in his pursuit of race leader Davies. Former Speedway star Kevin Tebbett on the Sun City KTM ultimately finished 4th after teammate Saki Niemont crashed and broke his leg, while an injured BT on his Greenib KTM moved steadily up the leaderboard. The motorcycle event comprised 3 60-kilometer laps, and 2 times winner Davies on his number 40 Drivelines Kawasaki continued on his winning way. Second place Presswood put on a tremendous performance, proving that motocrosses are a match for the off-roaders. Meanwhile, Beattie was hell-bent on closing the gap between him and Presswood. Kevin Tebbett rode to a deserved 4th overall and 2nd in the 500 class. John Hodgson on the KTM number 23 rode consistently to win the 200 class and finish a fine 8th overall. Jeremy Davies powered his Drivelines Kawasaki to a 3rd consecutive overall and class victory in the Camel Sun City 400. But drama befell Carl Presswood when within sight of the finish line, his Kawasaki ran out of fuel and he had to push it to the line without outside assistance. Despite summoning up all his remaining energy, Prestwood could not prevent a surprise BT from overtaking him to finish second overall and first in the 500 class. An exhausted Prestwood collapsed on the line to finish a well-earned third overall and second in the 250 class.
That's a third overall. An incredible effort. 200 or 300 meters to push the bike. What a finish.
Oh, it's great to win it again. But it got very fast near the end. It started off, it was very wet and slippery, and this last lap was really quick, but I didn't see the guys the whole day, so I had a free one. I was just worried. I thought they were coming the whole time, you know.
I didn't know where I was just till I got across the line, and they told me I was second, so that's another bonus.
Just before the last marshal, it's probably about almost a kilometre away, the bike actually died out while I was coming up to the finish in second place. And I pushed and pushed and pushed, and I wasn't allowed any help from backup crew. It felt like I was training all over again. But I was pushing, and I knew Stuart was coming right behind me. I knew Hilton was coming behind me, and he was catching me, so I had to push as fast as I could. But actually, the last 200 meters, I was just running out of energy. I'm not Bruce Fordyce, and I finally got to the finish in third place.
An eventful Camel Sun City 400 saw KTM pick up 5 places in the top 10, followed by Kawasaki with 4 and Suzuki with 1.
Terrein wat in hoë temperature en baie dik stof plaasgevind het. Die voorste 3 voertuie, Derek Benoy en Jack Purchase in 'n special. Die manne wat in die tweede plek wegspring, Klaus en Gert Degener in 'n Sandmaster Chinoy en in die derde posisie Linton Draper en Sarel Erasmus in 'n Nissan Hardbody. Dis vroegoggend en die son het nog nie eens sy kop uitgesteek toe die eerste manne wegspring nie. Johan Prinsloo, die klerk van die baan, is die man in beheer van die wegspring. Die eerste manne weg was Derek Benoy en Jack Purchase. Kort na hulle volg die broers Klaus en Gert Degener. En in die derde plek is dit Linton Draper en Sarel Erasmus. Die groenroete is die 60 km gedeelte waar die manne moes aflê om te sien wie spring in die voorste plekke weg. Die oranje roete strek vanaf Leeupan oor Maritsani, vandaar dan Magarooi wat oor die moeilike deel die trappe of die steps soos dit beter bekend staan ook insluit. Die enigste brandstofpunt vir voertuie en die vierde vir motorfietsse is sowat 250 km van die beginpunt. Vandaar oor Satagolle en terug na die eindpunt wat weer by Leeupan is. By Maritsani was dit die vroeë gunsteling Philip Malan en Richard Leek in 'n Toyota Land Cruiser wat in die 5de posisie weggespring het, wat vroeg die voortou geneem het. Kort op sy hakke was Klaus en Gert Degener in hulle Sandmaster. In 'n wolk van stof kan 'n mens net die hoofligte van Linton Draper en Sarel Erasmus sien wat nog steeds die derde plek beklee. En wie sal dit die keer in die stof wees? Cassie Coetzee en Willie Harrington in 'n Nissan Safari wat baie goed ry en van die 7de na die 4de posisie opgeskuif het. En van die plaaslike mielieboere die manne kom aanmoedig en was nie skaam om so 'n bietjie been te wys nie. Steve Vermaak en Jack Spencer in hulle Sandmaster in die 5de posisie. Die groenigheid van die plantegroei het getuig van goeie reën die afgelope klompie weke, maar dit het nie gekeer dat die byeenkoms in stowwerige toestande plaasgevind het nie. Veldren is dit beslis, partykeer op die pad, maar wat is fout as 'n mens 'n bietjie in die veld ook ry? Piet Pitter en Willem Jacobs en hulle Toyota dealer Team Hilux, wat die pas warm maak om die manne voor in te haal. 'n Pragtige groen Wes-Transvaal en 'n man in 'n Land Cruiser wat alles uithaal. En nog 'n klompie onverwagse toeskouers. Piet Pitter en Willem Jacobs nog steeds hard aan die werk. Een half uur na die voertuie die motorfietsse in die volgorde weggespring. Jeremy Davies en Hilton Beatty saam voor met Elfie Cox in die derde plek.
Only European stuff.
En waar die motorfietsse is, sal jy altyd die skone geslag kry. Davies en Beatty gereed vir die groot dinge en hulle kan nie wag vir daardie groen vlag om te sak nie. En sommer vroeg is dit Beatty wat die voortou neem. Weens die stowwerige toestande en die hoë snelhede was dit 'n donker dag vir Bawerspan. Louis Olofse van Randburg is dood nadat hy in 'n heining vasgery het en die Suid-Afrikaanse kampioen in die 200cc klas, Michael Kent, wat ook Springbok gimnas is bewusteloos langs die pad gevind, waar dit later in die Johannesburgse hospitaal weens breinbeserings beswyk. Maar nogtans het die manne nie gehuiwer om mekaar teen hoë snelhede te jaag nie. En op hierdie twee spore in die veld bly dit altyd moeilik om die tweewiel in die regte pad te hou. Craig Hopkinson en Martin Spencer in hulle Volkswagen